Hello everyone. This is the first part of video discussing regional and social variations of language. So before we discuss further, you can check one of these six slides, six videos, and give your opinions what language phenomenon did you see in the particular video. Next, the regional social variations. This first video will discuss regional variations of language and include the discussions of dialectology, regional dialect, and regional varieties such as rural, urban, distance, and isolations. So, regional variations of language. The issues in regional variations of language include the use of standard language, accent and dialects, dialectology, bilingualism, diglossia, language planning, and pidgin and creole. So the accents and dialects. Accent is the descriptions of aspect of pronunciation that identify where an individual speaker is from, whether regionally or socially. So in both cases of regional and social variations of language, you have certain accents. So for example, like I myself from Malang, which is part of East Java, and I have an accent of Javanese Malanese Javanese, which is regionally and socially different compared to, for example, like Yogyakartan's Javanese people who speak Yogyakartan types of variations of Javanese language. That's the accents which usually can be found in individual level and group level. There is also dialects, which is found mainly in social groups, although there is also idiolect, which shows individual dialects. The dialects have features of grammar and vocabulary, as well as aspects of pronunciations. It's more extensive than just accents, which is only covering the pronunciation of certain words. So the dialects is typically different categories of language based on certain regional variations. And there is no other varieties of language which are better than others. So they are just the same. You might consider that Malangnese Javanese compared to Banyumasan Javanese, Tegalnese Javanese, Surabayan Javanese, and Yogyakartan Javanese are the same. But then in social variations of language later on in the discussions of the social language, we will also discuss prestige or the standard language. So some varieties become more prestigious, as will be discussed later on in the second video, because of certain things, for example, like the power and authority used in the politics around that one. So because in Yogyakartan Javanese, there has been like a kingdom which extends from the last centuries until now. So many people and the power in which decide what to use decided that this certain variety is more prestigious than others. So this is some common issues we found in accent and dialects. That's why, for example, like we have a Jakartan Indonesian versions, which will be um, assumed by many speakers of Indonesians as more prestigious than, for example, like Papuan or Balinese Indonesian dialects. Next, the examples of English accent and dialects can be seen, for example, like some accents can be, you can check it here in the following URL link, and you also can check the English dialects, for example, like the received pronunciations, which is a very standard form in shared by Americans and British speakers of English. And some other English dialects like Cockney in East London, Scotland, Scots, Merseyside, Mancunian, Salfordian in Manchester and Salford, and so on. The example of accents can be seen, for example, the pronunciation of car and year between British and American accents, or the pronunciation of beautiful between south and north of London, the pronunciation of bath and bus. Or you can see, for example, like there is like individual accents, like for example, late president of Indonesia, Pak Suharto, has like usually use kun in the end of certain words to show the accents, his individual accents of pronunciation of this particular words. So, for example, rather than mengingatkan, he preferred to say it like mengingatkan and so on. The examples of dialects include the example from the dialectal variations between have you got the time in British English and do you have the time in American English, or some vocabulary differences between, for example, lift versus elevator, as well as postgraduate versus graduate in both British English and American English. The dialectology is the study of dialects. Dialectologists identify and describe differences in grammar, vocabularies, pronunciations between people or speakers of certain language from different dialects. So, for example, a dialectologist will try to study the differences and the similarity between people who speak Yogyakartan Javanese and, for example, the neighboring area like in Kulon Progo, Sleman, and so on. Or, for example, comparing how the people in certain Tapal Kuda areas close to northern coast of Java, like, for example, Bondowoso and Situbondo and Probolinggo, compare it with, for example, another area rather a little bit south, like in Jember and Lumajang, or other, for example, comparing Indonesian Jakartan versions of Indonesians with, for example, Indonesian used by people in Bandung or other areas. Dialectologists studies also the criterion used to distinguish the similarity or distinguish the differences between a dialect and language using the mutual intelligibility. So, for example, if the mutual intelligibility is less than 90%, it will be considered as not a dialect but different language. But then when the mutual intelligibility is very high, so it will be considered as a dialect. My question would be, what do you think about Malay speaks by the Malaysian people compared to Indonesian speaks by Indonesian people? Do you think it's a dialect or a language? Next, dialectology issues. Mutual intelligibility is not always accurate criterion because, for example, the Norwegian claim that they can understand Swedish, although they are different languages. The Cantonese speak Mandarin speakers in Canton area cannot understand Mandarin speaker, although they are considered as a dialect of Chinese. So there are many languages in China, mainland China, which they all of them are considered as different dialects of Mandarin, but then they are in actuality are not dialects because they are really different language, although they use similar writing system. Serbo-Croatians, for example, spoken in former Yugoslavia, but now those countries, Serbian, Croatian, and Bosnians claims that they speak different languages. Or similar with Malay in Indonesia and Malay in spoken in Malaysians. People will consider that both language, either Indonesian and Malay, are different language, but in fact, they have a very high score of mutual intelligibility. Next is the discussions on bilingualism and diglossia. Bilingualisms um, are um, language phenomena in which people or individual speaks more than one language because their parents speak two different languages. So for example, an Indonesian dad and a Japanese mom, when they married and they have a son who speaks both language, so the sons will be considered as individual who practice individual bilingualism. The diglossia is more structured and standardized versions of bilingualism. In diglossia, there were two varieties: low variety, spoken language acquired locally and used for everyday affairs, versus high variety, which is written language learned in school and used for important and institutional matters. So in this case, diglossia is slightly different to bilingualism, where in bilingualism, the focus is just that speaker speak two different language, but in diglossia, it's further that the difference is not between language, but between variety of languages, such as in spoken and written. An example. So the example of diglossia in Arab-speaking countries, that there is a high variety of classical Arab used in formal lectures, serious political events, religious discussions, and in the Quranic text, while the low variety is the local Egyptian Arabic, like in Tunisian Arabic, Lebanese Arabic, and Makkans Arabics, and other places. They can be not only in spoken form, but they can also be in written form, which quite close to each other, to the spoken form. Such other examples of diglossia can also be found in Greece, for example, with the use of katera fusca and demotiki, the conservative form versus daily language form before 1976, before this categorizations is changed. Language planning, concerned with the planning which variety or varieties of language spoken in a particular country are to be used for official business, such as the case of Indonesian and Indian. So in the case of Indonesians, during Sumpah Pemuda, the leaders of Indonesian communities in the past aim to select one certain language that is Malay versions of Riau um, uh, to be used as a national identity. So this is partly as a language planning, which are used to show the identity of Indonesian people, as opposed to characterize them as different entity with the Dutch and other social groups in Indonesia. The second one is an example of Indian. Indian did not agree to select just one language, so they select several languages. It's about 15 to 23 languages, I think, used as a formal language across India, because India have more than hundreds languages across India. But because there is no single standardized language, English is used as the main standard language, although it's not formally used as standard versions of language, but because many people cannot speak to one another with different languages, so they anonymously used in English as standard form in daily discussions across different languages. So language planning include at least five steps, including selections, codifications, elaborations, implementations, and then the acceptance. Next is Pidgin and Creole. The Pidgin is a variety of language, such as English, that is developed for some practical purpose, such as trading. And it is also used among groups of people who had a lot of contact, but who did not know each other's language. So a Malay in this case is not a Pidgin because it's already established language in the past. So it is more like a language used for people in business, but it's not a created language like a Pidgin. Examples include Tok Pisin spoken in Papua New Guinea and Lexifier language, which used English as the main source of words. So, for example, like the Tok Pisin, these are examples of Tok Pisin to book Digyal, like the girl's place, belong, or your book belong, your book, and so on. So you will see that this language used English as like a main source, but then it doesn't use English structure and it doesn't use English pronunciation as much as English do. The characteristic of Pidgins includes simple grammatical morphology, limited vocabulary, and plural suffix s. Possessive forms on nouns are rare, and syntactically, unlike the syntax of language used from which terms were borrowed and modified like English. So the Pidgin, if the Pidgin then spoken by people in the second generations, or people born and learn Pidgin and speak using Pidgin, it will have the phenomenon of creolizations, and where education and greater social prestige are associated with higher variety, some people who tend to use fewer Creole forms and structure, they are categories of groups which are vulnerable to decreolizations. And post-Creole continuum leads to a continuum of varieties with the external standard model at one extreme and a basic variety with local Creole features at the other. In Jamaica, there are three variations of Creole. First is that people from upper and middle class speaks the English variety. People from lower middle class and working class speaks intermediate varieties. And people from very low working class and farmers speak the Creole varieties. So the intermediate varieties is a combination of Creole combined with more established language. It is used because a more established language like English has a better syntactical structure, and they have a more extensive words to express intentions in communications. So next discussions will be the social variations in language and will be covered in the following video. Thank you so much.